At dawn on September 1, 1939, Europe awoke not to diplomacy or warnings, but to explosions. German aircraft crossed the Polish border in the early hours of the morning, their engines echoing over sleeping towns and villages. Within minutes, bombs struck railways, bridges, airfields, and communication centers. Civilians rushed into the streets in confusion, unsure if what they were witnessing was an exercise or the beginning of something far more serious. It was neither a drill nor an isolated incident. It was the opening act of World War II. This video reveals how the invasion of Poland unfolded in real time, how a modern war was unleashed with unprecedented speed and brutality, how civilians became immediate targets, and how secret agreements between dictators sealed Poland's fate before the first shot was fired. What you are about to hear is the true story of how a nation was overwhelmed, told through eyewitness accounts, military records, and historical testimony. If you enjoy these war journeys, I invite you to like, subscribe, or share a thought in the comments below. This helps others find their way here too. For now, let's begin our journey. In 1939, Poland occupied one of the most dangerous positions in Europe. Having regained independence only 21 years earlier after more than a century of foreign domination, the country was surrounded by powers that viewed its sovereignty as temporary. Nazi Germany to the west openly demanded territory, while the Soviet Union to the east watched in silence. Polish leaders knew war was likely, but timing was everything. Mobilizing too early risked provoking Germany and losing diplomatic support from Britain and France. Mobilizing too late risked catastrophe. As a result, when the invasion began, many Polish units were still assembling, soldiers traveling by train or foot to reach their positions, unaware that war had already arrived. German preparations had been extensive and deliberate. For months, troops, tanks, and artillery were positioned along the border under the guise of military exercises. Propaganda intensified, accusing Poland of persecuting ethnic Germans and staging acts of aggression. On the night of August 31, 1939, the Nazis carried out Operation Himmler, a series of false flag attacks designed to create the illusion of Polish aggression. The most infamous occurred at the Gleiwitz radio station, where German operatives dressed in Polish uniforms briefly broadcast an anti-German message before fleeing. To make the lie convincing, murdered concentration camp prisoners were left behind as supposed Polish attackers. The following morning, Adolf Hitler addressed the Reichstag, claiming that Germany had been forced to respond to Polish attacks. It was a fabrication, but it provided the excuse he needed. At exactly 4:45 a.m., the German battleship Schleswig-Holstein opened fire on the Polish garrison at Westerplatte, near the free city of Danzig. Anchored there under the pretense of a friendly visit, the ship unleashed heavy shells against Polish defenses. German commanders expected the position to fall within hours. Instead, fewer than 200 Polish soldiers held out for 7 days against overwhelming firepower, becoming one of the earliest symbols of resistance in the war. Across the border, German forces advanced simultaneously from multiple directions. This was not a conventional invasion. It was a new form of warfare designed to overwhelm before an enemy could react. The Germans called it Blitzkrieg, or lightning war. Tanks, infantry, artillery, and aircraft were coordinated with terrifying efficiency. Panzer divisions punched through weak points in Polish defenses, bypassing strongholds and racing deep into the interior. Stuka dive bombers screamed down from the sky, their sirens deliberately engineered to spread fear as much as destruction. Roads clogged with refugees became scenes of chaos as civilians fleeing the fighting found themselves strafed from the air. Whether through misidentification or deliberate policy, civilians were no longer spared. Polish soldiers fought with determination, but they were often outmatched by speed and technology. Contrary to long-standing myths, Polish cavalry did not charge German tanks with sabers. Cavalry units functioned as mobile infantry, dismounting to fight. In several engagements, they successfully repelled German infantry. But against tanks supported by aircraft, even disciplined resistance had limits. One Polish officer later recalled that they often did not know where the enemy was, only where he had already passed. From the first day, the Luftwaffe sought total air superiority. Polish airfields were bombed at dawn, destroying aircraft on the ground. Communication lines were severed, rail hubs shattered, and supply routes disrupted. The intention was clear: paralyze Poland before full mobilization could occur. Despite flying outdated aircraft and facing overwhelming odds, Polish pilots fought with remarkable courage, shooting down dozens of German planes in the opening days. Their success, however, came at a heavy cost. Losses mounted quickly, and replacements were impossible. Within a week, the skies belonged almost entirely to Germany. For civilians, the invasion was immediate and devastating. Towns with no military significance, such as Wielun, were bombed without warning. Hospitals, churches, and schools were reduced to rubble. Survivors described bodies buried beneath collapsed buildings and entire families killed in seconds. Refugee columns stretched for miles, families carrying what little they could salvage. Mothers pushed carts, children clutched toys, and the elderly struggled to keep pace. German aircraft circled overhead, dropping bombs among the fleeing crowds. One survivor later said there was no safe direction, no road that did not lead to death. As German forces advanced rapidly, the Polish command faced growing chaos. Communication networks collapsed under sustained bombing. Orders arrived late or not at all. Units fought isolated battles, unaware that neighboring formations had already been destroyed or encircled. Despite this, resistance continued across the country. At Mokra, Polish forces inflicted significant losses on a German panzer division. At Wiesna, a small garrison held off tens of thousands of German troops for days, earning comparisons to the last stand at Thermopylae. These battles demonstrated extraordinary courage, but they could not alter the strategic reality. Behind the scenes, Poland's fate had already been decided. On August 31, 1939, Germany and the Soviet Union signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, a non-aggression treaty that included a secret protocol dividing Eastern Europe into spheres of influence. Poland was to be partitioned once again. While German forces closed in from the west, the Red Army waited along the eastern border. Polish leaders still hoped that Britain and France, who had declared war on Germany, would launch a major offensive in the west and force Germany to divert their forces. That offensive never came.
By mid-September, the Polish army was exhausted, fragmented, and surrounded on multiple fronts. Yet soldiers continued to fight, driven by duty and the belief that holding on might still matter. Few knew that another invasion was imminent, one that would strike from the opposite direction and seal Poland's fate. The first chapter of World War II was drawing to a close, but the suffering had only begun. On September 17, 1939, while Polish forces were still engaged in desperate battles against the German advance, a new and devastating reality emerged. At dawn, units of the Red Army crossed Poland's eastern border. There was no formal declaration of war. Soviet radio broadcasts claimed they were entering Polish territory to protect Ukrainian and Belarusian populations after the alleged collapse of the Polish state. For Polish soldiers and civilians alike, the truth became clear within hours. Poland was now being crushed from two directions, caught between two totalitarian powers whose cooperation had been sealed in secret weeks earlier. Many Polish units in the east had been redeployed westward to resist Germany, leaving the border thinly defended. When Soviet tanks and infantry advanced, confusion reigned. Some Polish commanders initially believed the Soviets had come to assist them against Germany. Orders from Warsaw were unclear, and communication lines were already in ruins. Only after clashes erupted did the reality sink in. The Polish government, realizing that further organized resistance was impossible, ordered most units to avoid fighting the Red Army where possible and attempt to withdraw toward Romania or Hungary. Despite these orders, combat did occur. In several locations, Polish units resisted Soviet advances, unwilling to surrender without a fight. These engagements were often brief and brutal. The Red Army, numerically superior and supported by armor, overwhelmed isolated Polish formations. Thousands of Polish soldiers were taken prisoner in the opening days of the Soviet invasion. Many believed captivity would spare them further suffering. For tens of thousands, it would become a death sentence. As Poland collapsed militarily, civilians faced a nightmare without refuge. In the West, German occupation authorities moved swiftly to impose control. Public executions began almost immediately. Polish intellectuals, teachers, priests, and local leaders were arrested as part of a systematic campaign to eliminate potential resistance. In the East, Soviet forces conducted mass arrests of officers, police, and civil servants. Families were torn apart as men were taken away, often without explanation, never to be seen again. Warsaw, the heart of the Polish state, became a focal point of resistance. Encircled by German forces, the city endured relentless bombardment. Artillery pounded residential districts, water supplies were destroyed, and fires raged unchecked. Civilians sheltered in basements and makeshift bunkers, emerging only to search for food and water amid the ruins. Hospitals overflowed with wounded soldiers and civilians alike. Despite overwhelming odds, Warsaw refused to surrender immediately. For weeks, its defenders held out, knowing that relief would not come. Eyewitnesses described streets choked with rubble and smoke, horses lying dead at intersections, and entire neighborhoods reduced to ash. One civilian later recalled that the sound of explosions never stopped, day or night. The psychological toll was immense. Yet even in these conditions, acts of solidarity persisted. Civilians shared food, doctors operated without anesthesia, and volunteers risked their lives to rescue the wounded under fire. On September 28, 1939, after nearly a month of fighting, Warsaw surrendered. The decision came after the city's infrastructure had been nearly destroyed and civilian casualties had mounted into the tens of thousands. German troops marched into the ruins, raising their flags over a broken capital. The fall of Warsaw marked the symbolic end of organized Polish resistance, but fighting continued in isolated pockets across the country. One of the last major engagements occurred at Koch in early October. Polish forces, cut off and surrounded, fought a series of battles against German units. Despite shortages of ammunition, food, and medical supplies, they resisted for days. Only when further resistance became utterly futile did they lay down their arms. The last Polish units surrendered on October 6, 1939, more than a month after the invasion began. For the people of Poland, defeat did not bring peace. It brought occupation, terror, and repression. Germany and the Soviet Union moved quickly to divide the country according to the terms of their secret agreement. The western regions were annexed directly into the German Reich. Central Poland became the general government, a colonial territory ruled with brutality. In the east, the Soviets incorporated vast areas into the Ukrainian and Belarusian Soviet republics. Life under occupation was marked by fear. In German-controlled areas, mass executions, forced labor, and the persecution of Jews began almost immediately. Ghettos were established, and entire communities were confined, starved, and terrorized. In Soviet-occupied territories, deportations followed. Hundreds of thousands of Polish citizens were sent in cattle cars to Siberia and Central Asia, many dying along the way from hunger, cold, and disease. Polish prisoners of war faced grim fates. Those captured by Germany were sent to camps, where conditions were harsh but governed by international conventions, at least initially. Those taken by the Soviets were treated differently. Officers, intellectuals, and members of the elite were separated from the rank and file. In the spring of 1940, thousands of them would be executed in secret by the Soviet NKVD, their bodies buried in mass graves. At the time, their families waited in vain for news, unaware that their loved ones were already dead. Despite the collapse of the state, the Polish nation did not surrender. Almost immediately, underground networks began to form. Soldiers who avoided capture went into hiding. Civilians organized secret schools, distributed underground newspapers, and gathered intelligence. The foundations of what would become one of the largest resistance movements in occupied Europe were laid in the ruins of 1939. For the wider world, the invasion of Poland marked a brutal awakening. Britain and France were officially at war with Germany, yet their armies remained largely inactive. This period, later known as the Phony War, offered little comfort to the people of Poland. The promises of alliance had not prevented destruction. The balance of power in Europe had shifted dramatically,
and the methods of warfare unleashed in Poland would soon be repeated on a far larger scale. By the end of 1939, Poland had ceased to exist as an independent state once again. Its territory was occupied, its people scattered, imprisoned, or killed. But beneath the surface of defeat, something enduring remained. Memory, anger, and determination took root, waiting for the moment when Poland would rise again. The invasion had ended, but its consequences were only beginning to unfold.
After the guns fell silent in October 1939, Poland did not find peace, but a new form of war. The front lines disappeared, replaced by occupation, fear, and systematic repression. German and Soviet authorities moved quickly to erase Polish identity and eliminate any potential for resistance. For civilians, the war became intimate and constant, woven into daily life through arrests, deportations, and executions carried out without warning. In German-occupied Poland, terror was immediate and deliberate. The Nazi leadership viewed Poles as racially inferior and politically dangerous. Even before the invasion ended, lists of teachers, professors, priests, journalists, and former officers had been prepared. These individuals were arrested in coordinated actions and either sent to concentration camps or executed on the spot. Entire villages were punished for minor acts of defiance. Public executions were staged in town squares, bodies left hanging for hours as a warning. Survivors recalled being forced to watch, knowing that any display of emotion could result in their own arrest. For Poland's Jewish population, the occupation marked the beginning of a nightmare that would culminate in genocide. Jews were immediately subjected to forced labor, beatings, and humiliations. They were ordered to wear identifying armbands and confined to designated areas. By late 1939 and early 1940, ghettos began to form in major cities. Families were crowded into small apartments, food was rationed to starvation levels, and disease spread rapidly. Many did not survive the first winter under occupation. In the Soviet-occupied East, repression followed a different but equally devastating pattern. The Soviet authorities dismantled Polish institutions and replaced them with Soviet administration. Landowners, civil servants, police officers, and military personnel were arrested en masse. Families were often given only minutes to gather belongings before being forced onto trains bound for Siberia or Central Asia. Survivors later described weeks-long journeys in freezing conditions, with little food or water, and deaths that went unrecorded. Children grew up in exile, far from home, unsure if they would ever return. One of the darkest chapters of this occupation unfolded in the spring of 1940. Thousands of Polish officers and members of the intelligentsia who had been captured by the Soviets vanished. For decades, their fate was denied and obscured. It is now known that they were executed by the NKVD and buried in mass graves, including the forest near Katyn. At the time, their families waited for letters that would never arrive, living with uncertainty that became its own form of torment. Yet even under these conditions, Poland did not break. Almost immediately, resistance networks began to form across the occupied territories. Former soldiers, students, and civilians organized themselves into clandestine groups. Underground presses produced newspapers that circulated in secret, carrying news from abroad and messages of defiance. Illegal schools operated in private homes, preserving Polish language, history, and culture. These acts, though nonviolent, carried immense risk. Discovery meant imprisonment, torture, or death. The Polish underground soon became one of the most extensive resistance movements in Europe. Intelligence gathered in occupied Poland was smuggled to the Allies, providing crucial information about German troop movements, weapons development, and later the existence of extermination camps. Couriers traveled across borders using false identities, knowing that capture meant certain execution. Their work remained largely invisible, but its impact was profound. Polish soldiers who escaped the country regrouped abroad. Thousands made their way through Romania and Hungary, eventually reaching France and later Britain. There, they formed new military units, determined to continue the fight.
Polish pilots would later play a decisive role in the Battle of Britain, while Polish soldiers fought in campaigns across North Africa, Italy, and Western Europe. Though their homeland was occupied, Poland remained at war. For civilians still living under occupation, survival required constant adaptation. People learned to speak in whispers, to avoid eye contact with authorities, to memorize new identities. Ordinary objects took on new meaning. A hidden book, a whispered prayer, a shared piece of bread became acts of resistance. Fear was ever present, but so was solidarity. Neighbors warned each other of raids, hid fugitives, and shared scarce resources. Many would later pay with their lives for these choices. The international response to Poland's suffering was limited. While the Polish government in exile worked tirelessly to inform the world, strategic priorities often overshadowed moral outrage. Reports of mass killings and deportations were received with disbelief or dismissed as propaganda. For those inside Poland, the sense of abandonment deepened, yet it did not extinguish hope. Resistance was sustained not by optimism, but by the conviction that surrender would mean annihilation. By 1941, the situation shifted again. Germany turned on its former ally and invaded the Soviet Union. The eastern territories of Poland, once under Soviet occupation, fell into German hands, bringing with them the full machinery of Nazi racial policy. Mass shootings intensified. Entire Jewish communities were wiped out in forests and ravines. The war reached a new level of brutality, and Poland once again found itself at the center of a conflict it had not chosen. The invasion of Poland in 1939 was no longer a single event confined to a single month. It had become the foundation of years of suffering, resistance, and sacrifice. What began with bombs and tanks evolved into a silent war, fought in basements, forests, and hidden rooms. The cost was measured not only in destroyed cities and lost lives, but in stolen childhoods and shattered families. As the war dragged on, the question remained unresolved. When the fighting finally ended, would Poland regain its freedom, or would it once again be reshaped by the will of others? The answer would only come after unimaginable loss, and it would carry its own bitter truths.
As the war moved toward its final years, Poland remained a battlefield, even without front lines. Its cities lay in ruins, its population decimated, and its future uncertain. What began in 1939 as a swift invasion had evolved into years of occupation, resistance, and unimaginable loss. By the time Allied forces advanced across Europe and the defeat of Nazi Germany came into sight, Poland had already paid one of the highest prices of the war. In 1944, as the Red Army pushed westward, hope and fear returned simultaneously. For many Poles, the approaching Soviet forces represented liberation from German terror. For others, it signaled the return of an occupier that had already betrayed and brutalized them. Nowhere was this tension more visible than in Warsaw. In August of that year, the Polish underground launched the Warsaw Uprising, a desperate attempt to liberate the capital before the Soviets arrived, hoping to assert Poland's sovereignty. For 63 days, poorly armed resistance fighters battled German forces street by street. Civilians joined the fight, building barricades and serving as messengers and medics. The response was merciless. German units systematically destroyed the city, executing civilians en masse and leveling entire districts. The Red Army, positioned on the eastern bank of the Vistula River, did not intervene in time. When the uprising was finally crushed, Warsaw was almost completely destroyed, and hundreds of thousands were dead. The city became a symbol not only of courage, but of abandonment and betrayal. When the war in Europe ended in 1945, Poland was technically on the winning side, yet the reality was far more complex. The country's borders were redrawn. Large portions of eastern Poland were absorbed by the Soviet Union, while Poland was compensated with German territories in the west. Millions were forced to relocate, creating one of the largest population movements in European history.
Families that had survived the war now faced exile from their ancestral homes. Politically, Poland did not regain true independence. A Soviet-backed communist government took power, suppressing former resistance members and silencing opposition. Many who had fought the Nazis were now labeled enemies of the state. Prisons filled once again. The war had ended, but freedom had not arrived. The human cost of the invasion of Poland is staggering. Approximately 6 million Polish citizens died during the war, half of them Jews murdered in the Holocaust. Entire cities were destroyed. Cultural heritage was looted or erased. Generations grew up marked by trauma and loss. Yet, despite this devastation, Poland endured. Language, culture, and memory survived where armies and governments had failed. The invasion of Poland in 1939 was not only the beginning of World War II, it was a warning the world failed to heed. The tactics tested there, the disregard for civilian life, and the use of terror as policy would soon spread across continents. Poland became the first victim of a war that would consume the world, but it was never merely a victim. It resisted, endured, and remembered. Today, the lessons of those events remain painfully relevant. They remind us how quickly peace can collapse, how propaganda can justify destruction, and how ordinary people are often the first to pay the price of ambition and hatred. Remembering the invasion of Poland is not only an act of historical reflection, but a responsibility to those who lived and died through it. If you made it to the end of this documentary, leave a comment sharing what most impacted you, and include the keyword Poland, so we know you stayed until the final moment. Don't forget to leave a like if this story added value to your understanding of history, and subscribe to the channel for more real war documentaries told through true accounts and deep storytelling. Continue watching the next videos appearing on your screen now to explore more untold stories from the history of war and humanity.